ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chamber of the Wraith. My name is Brian, and today we are covering the final launch characters for Injustice Gods Among Us. And then tomorrow, the final day, we'll be covering Martian Manhunter and General Zod. But, since we're covering the last of the launch characters, get ready, Titans. It's time for Cyborg and Deathstroke to enter the fray. Now, these characters epitomize a similar niche. They may be jack-of-all-trades type characters, but they rely a little bit more on zoning than most of their other tools in order to get the job done. Now, let's go to Themyscira. And we'll start with Cyborg today. Cyborg is a very interesting beast in that he has a lot of odd normals, but he doesn't have very many strengths because his position is more so a zoning role. Humanity comes out with a quick high that ends with an overhead kick that knocks the opponent down. A good way to catch an opponent who is blocking, but there is a little bit of a gap. I don't know if it's punishable or not, but there's just a tiny bit of a gap to give enough reaction time. Comeback is faster and can technically launch, but is a lot weaker at only 8%. But, like I said, it can be special canceled. So that's worth noting. Okay, that doesn't work. Man Within. There's a tricky low in there, and because it comes out at about the same speed, it ends in a mid. But you can trick the opponent with an overhead, and then hit them with the overhead in order to knock them down. But because it leaves the opponents standing, many standing special attacks can connect as well. Blowout comes off of a fairly quick mid that knocks the opponent back, and is also special cancelable. Lost Faith comes off of this low, which can be delayed. So you can do stuff like this. And then end this string in order to send the opponent back. But you have to dial in the last section, so be mindful of that. Sideline comes off of a fairly decent reaching mid that hits from start of the round range and knocks the opponent back. Now let's talk special moves. Okay, so Nova Blaster in the air is the same input. I'm just gonna drop it. Same. Oh well, Upsonic Disruptor is different. Okay, Nova Blaster is Cyborg's standard projectile. It's fast, it covers mid, and can be held to delay and cancel. Amplify it to fire a blast upwards. I don't believe you have an option to fire two straight. Yeah, so it only fires in an upward trajectory. So really only useful if you catch an opponent jumping in, trying to jump over your projectile, you spend the meter to get a little extra damage. You can also do this attack in the air, with the Amplify being aimed downwards. So you can do something like this instead. Hit them twice if you're really good with your timing. You can also, of course, instant air, making these recover faster and keeping Cyborg zoning in check. I'm not great with instant airs. In fact, this is the best I've ever done with instant airs, but you get this shit unlock, and then your opponent's not going to be able to jump. It's just going to be a zone fest. Also, the grounded version is a mid, while the air version is a high. So you can duck under the air versions, but you can't duck under the ground version. So there's a little bit of a mind game there. Power Fist is a 12% ender. That is a lot slower on hit than it is on whiff or on block. Note that versus note this. On Amplify, unlike in Injustice 2, you get some distance out of it, and that's all. Techno Tackle is still the leaping command grab that it is. I believe it is still duckable. I believe it is duckable, though. Yeah, it's duckable, but unblockable. So, your opponent can punish this pretty easily if Cyborg doesn't land it, and then if he amplifies, get some distance out of it. So you can get, quick, dirty, and easy damage with a little bit of corner carry. Not bad at all. And then there's Sonic Disruptor. It's a quick mid that can be held to delay it, and then when fired, it sends the opponent back. There's an anti-air version. Do this, right? Oh yeah, I can do this, right? That hits anti-air. You can't meter burn either of the Sonic Disruptors, but what you can do is if you I have put in the input for up, right? If I hold it for too long, it's going to be up. But watch this. I can choose which direction I want to put it based off of the input I put in and the secondary input to make opponents think twice about trying to cross Cyborg up while he's doing this. Now I'm actually going to clear Nova Blaster and Power Fist to make sure the other two moves are in. Yeah, there we go. Target acquired is, despite how it looks, it's actually an overhead when this connects, and it does pop up the opponent, but there's no amplify. So the idea with target acquired is that you would launch the opponent and then you would do something like this. Force them to eat this on Oki, and enforce it with things like Nova Blaster so that they have to try and block. Especially if it's an instant air, because they might not know the timing of this. It's also special cancelable. And there's different ranges, too, that you can place this in. You have close, mid, and far. The effective range of this attack is basically where the shockwave touches the opponent. Not the main wave, but the actual explosion where the ground is scorched. Boom. Launch the opponent that way. And then there's grapple. This doesn't have armor and is a little bit trickier to land. But Cassie Cage mains will find this very similar to how Cassie Cage escapes in Soup's OD. And yes, it is meterless, but I don't believe it is armored. I'm actually going to have Deathstroke try something. Oh, it is armored. Okay, so it's armored right at the start. That wasn't the case in Launch Injustice. This move was awful, which is unfortunate because Cyborg had quite a few awful moves, and that made him... and that kind of weakened Cyborg's abilities. What didn't help is that his trait on paper sounds great. Repair Sarcasm. It heals Cyborg while it's active. But there's a problem with that. Okay, I got hit with a 6% attack. Okay, it's better than I remember. So I'll get hit a few times by this. One more. Okay, so I got hit by a few of these, so I'm at about, we'll say, 17% damage. So I healed about 10 to 12%. That's actually better than the Injustice version of this trait, but the trait takes forever to build back up. And yes, you can special cancel out of it, so you can do this, and then cancel into trait, or cancel into dash. The problem is that if you cancel it if you cancel this, or if you get hit, you lose the trait. So on paper, this trait's great, but it is seriously hampered by design choices that unfortunately mean that this is one of the worst traits in the game, unfortunately. Cyborg does have a fairly decent super move, though, in Target Lock, which is an 11-frame mid. With big range. Big fist into big weapon! I wonder if... So, at least you can cancel Repair Circuit into super move, which means you can armor through whatever the opponent wants to throw your way after getting some heals. So there's that, but... Oh, and then you get it back? Okay, so there is a little bit of actual use here, but it requires 4 bar, and using the super move to recover your trait, which is not normally a thing you can do in NetherRealm games. Because usually... Oh, that's weird. Just me or is it glitched? Hold on. I think I might have just discovered a glitch. Hold on. So I'm gonna intentionally whiff this. Okay, so it didn't work that time. Maybe I gotta wait for it to heal a little bit. No. It looks like it was just a visual glitch. Damn, that would have been really funny if it continued to heal after the super move. But alas, that is not to be. Closer to mid-tier, we have Deathstroke. And boy howdy, Deathstroke is... If you didn't like dealing with Deadshot in the past, you're not going to like fighting Deathstroke. But let's start with his strengths first. Terminator, not the robot, but the actual full name of Deathstroke is Deathstroke the Terminator. That is until the Terminator movie came out about a year later, and that moniker was dropped to prevent confusion. Just like Cyborg, it starts off with a high and ends in an overhead. But the overhead is slightly faster and actually looks like an overhead. So it looks like an overhead, but it's slightly quicker. Human Hunting throws in a gunshot, which means Deadshot, like Aaron Black, gets a projectile off of a whiff, which can be tricky. It's not the best projectile in the world, but you want to close out a round and fake out the opponent into eating the 5% necessary? There you go. And then Human Hunting can combo in the corner. So, let's see if I can make it loop. Not really. Okay. Then there's Contract Killer and Never Saw It. Both of these come off of this low, which actually has pretty good range. Not quite start of the match range, but pretty good regardless. If you press up medium, it launches the opponent. For combos, meterlessly. And then you can go for a low-low, which means you have some mix-up potential here. You go for the low-low, you go for the overhead if you want to spend the meter, or does he have an overhead? Yeah, he does if he goes into sword spin, so it's not a true mix-up, but it's still really good. Silent Approach comes off of this kick, and you don't get a combo off of it, but you get range. Quite a bit of range, which is good for Deathstroke, because that's what he wants. Then there's Search and Destroy. Comes off of this mid, you gotta dial it in pretty quick, and it's special cancelable. Next we have Identity Crisis, Sladeway, and Kill Confirmed. Identity Crisis starts off of this, I'm pretty sure, unreactable overhead. Yeah, this is an overhead watch your noggin from back 2. 13 frames, unreactable. And back 1, sorry, is 15 frames. So the low is slower than the overhead. That doesn't make any sense. And you knock the opponent down with a second overhead to give some distance. But if you do Slade Way, you launch the opponent midway through the string. So you can do this, but it looks like you can't actually combo. Can't even special cancel. So all you can do is finish the string, which launches the opponent. I wonder if... It looks like the grenade doesn't actually come out during... Looks like the grenade doesn't come out on whiff, so that's something to keep in mind. And then kill confirmed comes off of this great mid. Look at that range. And then you can go into the full string for a flashy finish. So do I have... Let's try this. I want to try something here. Oh shit. Unfortunately, you can't get anything else after that, but you either get a little less damage and more distance, or you get... Oh, it's the same amount of damage, it's just distance and the special move input. So you get the easier version or the harder version. A little more damage as a reward for going hard, but nothing to write home about. Quick fire, low shots, machine gun, upward machine gun. Air quick fire, and sword flip. So, these are all of Deathstroke's moves. Quick fire, as I mentioned, quick draw, really fast projectile. Breaks armor, does decent damage. Amplify, to leave the opponent standing and force them to take more damage. And of course, there's an air version. Let's see if we can do this right. Yep, you can instant air these too. But these are not amplifiable. Only the ground version is. Which brings me to low shots. A little bit slower, but Deathstroke not only ducks to avoid projectiles, but can trade with a low. This is like an armor-breaking version of Cassie's low take the knee gunshot, but it's actually a low, which can then be amplified to knock the opponent back. As if this wasn't already one of the best zoning tools in the game, in my opinion. Really good for avoiding high projectiles, and then if you amplify it to just counter it. Then there's machine gun. A little bit slower, but it hits mid and does a little more damage. See, this is doing 14% as opposed to 6% on its own, and 16% with meter. And remember too, 11% without meter, 6 with meter, 6% without. So this is kind of your damage. You want damage at range, go for the machine gun. Especially if you amplify for an overhead grenade, that makes it almost 20%. But here's where it gets nuts. Let's say your opponent is clever. They're jumping, they're being patient, they're jumping over your gun, they're using air dash if their character allows it. What do? It'd be a shame if Deathstroke also had an air version of machine gun, wouldn't it? And it gets even better. Also has a grenade. And if you want to be cheeky about it, you can even just shoot this straight. The opponent will be confused, and then there's a good chance you'll actually clip them with the grenade if they decide to try and jump and capitalize. Not the greatest use of this in the world, but I mean, there's a use for it at least. Then, now we get to one of two special moves that is close range. Sword spin. Quick mid that leaves the opponent standing, and I believe is actually fairly safe. Let me double check. Yeah, according to the frame data, sword spin is -6, which I don't think is completely safe in this game because there are 6 frame attacks. Yeah, there are 6 frame attacks out there, but Deathstroke definitely doesn't have them, so you don't have to worry about that in the mirror match. He can amplify this for a mid or for an overhead, or amplify early to get a low out of it. But here's the thing to keep in mind with sword spin. the overhead only comes out on the second hit. So if you block low, and then hear the sound, this is the key, because human beings react faster to sound than they do to sight. So if you hear that meter burn, stand up. You should be able to catch this. If not, then the worst case scenario is that you're eating, what, 5% damage? I can't test it because you have to hit the opponent in order to get an overhead. But yeah, you eat at the most 5% and get some distance. And some opponents even beat Deathstroke in the zoning department. But remember, Deathstroke's got pretty good normals at close range, so sometimes he'll want to get in. And one of the best ways to seal the deal is sword flip, in which Deathstroke leaps in the air, swipes with his sword, and knocks the opponent down, giving him enough time to dash in and enforce pressure with the rifle butt, or with the low kick, or go for an overhead. He has options out of sword flip, and if he amplifies it... Oh, that's right, he can't amplify this. But you might recognize this as one of Robin's special moves in Injustice 2. He straight up stole this from Deathstroke, and he can only do it in the air. Whereas, Deathstroke can only do it on the ground. Neat trade-off. Now let's talk Deathstroke's super move, trait, which is not as bad as it sounds. It was actually worse before, and then it got buffed. So, Deathstroke focuses, and then a reticule pops up, and then it's gone after a relatively short while. It doesn't look like it did much. It doesn't give him a right away buff. But what it did do is make all of his gunshots unblockable. However, while on cooldown, every single gunshot attack he has will whiff. Every time. And that includes gun attacks that are in his normal arsenal. Meaning that if the Deathstroke is too cocky and wastes his trait, you could theoretically punish him in the middle of this string, because the gunshot will always miss. And furthermore, that means that this string here whiffs entirely, leaving you a chance to wake up and punish Deathstroke. So, the reward for activating trait is unblockable guns. But there's another caveat I just noticed. Remember how much damage the rifle shots were doing and the pistol shots? Well, in this state, Deathstroke is doing half damage from his guns. So you're trading half of the damage for a temporary unblockable boost. This is really only good for closing out rounds, and even then, you have to make damn sure that you maximize this to kill them at just the right moment. Otherwise, you'll have just wasted it. However, if I remember right, I believe the grenades are exempt from this. Yeah, the grenades are exempt from the rule because they're not bullets. Which means, too, that Deathstroke's throws are exempt from this rule. So, it's not the end of the world for Deathstroke zoning, but when Deathstroke finishes his zoning, he's going to be coming in while his trait is recovering, unless he's smart and burns it to close out a round, and then uses the round taunt in order to specifically burn through the cooldown. Now let's talk his super move, which is actually really good. Eye for an eye. It's 22 frames, so it's not the fastest in the world, but here's what it does have. Unbridled speed. You didn't even see him move. They didn't even bother animating Deathstroke doing that, but... yeah, and this is still one of the highest damaging super moves in the game. It originally did 40%, and now it only does 38%. Only does 38%, but... this is a lethal super move, especially at full screen. If Deathstroke's trait has run out, and he has full meter, guess what? He could go for super, zip in, close out a round with this, and his trait will still be recovering, however, it won't take
quite as long because of the fact that if he closes out a round with this bad boy, he's going to be doing his round victory animation to save some time. That's it for Cyborg and Deathstroke. The thing about Cyborg is that he's a bit of a low-tier hero, but once you get the hang of it, I'm sure that any Cyborg fans who want to give him a try can still pull out some wins. They just have to work a little bit harder than the rest of the cast. Don't forget to be awesome, my friends, and I'll see you guys on the other side.